Hello, hello, everyone. I am Cassandra Quinn, and for those who don't know me, I am the programs chair and I serve on the volunteer leadership team of the Chicago chapter of Conscious Capitalism. I'm also the founder and CEO of Quinnovate, and I have the privilege of being here with Christine Sandman Stone and continuing a conversation that we actually got to start with her. In November, actually. And then we had a little bit of a holiday break, and we're back to continue this conversation because we started it in person, live in an intimate leadership breakfast setting. And we thought this would be a really great conversation to take to a broader audience and invite more people in. So before we jump in, though, Christine, can you tell everybody who you are and what you do in the world?
Sure. I'm Christine Sandman Stone. I'm an advisor, an author, a speaker. I am the person that people call when they are working so hard, but not getting the results they expect, or they have more work than time. I do advisory work with leaders and with teams. My specialty is pragmatic, efficient solutions that get business results. I love my work. I love the clients I work with. And I really enjoyed the conversation back in November. I'm so excited to continue it today.
Me too. And for those that may not be familiar, our leadership breakfast series this year, and it actually kicked off with Christine in November, is an author series. And so we had Christine here because she had recently authored an amazing book that we thought was really relevant to the kinds of conversations that we're having. So do you want to tell people just a little bit about your book too?
Certainly. I have 4 children. The oldest one got a management job and asked for a book recommendation. She said, I have 4 weeks before I start leading this team. And she's A plus high achieving individual contributor. She wanted to be an exceptional manager. She's like, what do I read? And I was really tangled up in giving an answer, honestly, because all of the books on my shelves, and I have lots of books on my shelves, trend toward one of 2 categories. They're inspirational, like Brene Brown, Dare to Lead, or they're very theoretical, like the Buckingham work out of the Gallup organization or Kusis and Posner. And I realized, man, the last thing a 29-year-old manager needs is inspiration or theory. Neither of those help you in your first month or 2 leading a team. So we started working together, and I'd email her lists. Like, these are 8 questions you should ask before you start. They'll help you kind of get the lay of the land about what's going on and where you need to focus. Here are good ways to approach one-on-one. And here's why it's structured. And this is what you're looking for, because if you use the structure week over week, you're going to start to find out how good people are at predicting their work. And then you can really decide how you're going to lean in and help them. What surprised me, so the 2 of us collaborated together. She tested it for me. She'd reply back like, this was great, or something like, man, that did not work. And we'd adjust it. Her team was global and remote. And so we'd make adjustments. And then I had 5 other managers test it, 2 in London, 2 in India, another in the US. And we were able to really come up with a tight, lightweight collection of 50 tools that help a manager. And I thought, oh, this is brilliant. This is really going to help brand new managers. And the weirdest thing is that it just got its 3rd award a couple weeks ago. Yay. Sales are great. And the audience is not who I thought it was. The audience has become skewed toward senior and executive leaders. And they're saying things to me like, I need to get more productivity out of my teams. Where do I look? And the management layer for me is the obvious space. We've made our strategies agile and dynamic. They change, as market conditions change, consumers change, new competitors rise, and we've changed where people are. A lot of us run hybrid teams now, but nobody's really gone back to managers and said, this is how you manage an agile strategy, a hybrid team. And I'm having so much fun with these senior leaders who are saying, I want to use this to refresh, renew, and strengthen myself or the people who report to me. So it's been a heck of an adventure. And I have to give credit to Madeline Stone Cutis, who was my collaborator on this journey. She helped write sections of the book. She definitely tested them all out. And if there's one thing I can tell to everyone who listens to this, you need to be working with millennials. They're brilliant, They have a value set that lends himself toward excellence. They are an untapped resource in the majority of our organizations. I definitely got value out of working with her.
Oh, I love it. And I think that like what I heard you touching on is that though you intended this for those new managers like your daughter, it really ended up filling in a gap for senior leaders too. And I wonder if some of that is coming from a place that people end up sometimes in those senior leadership positions because they have been in that middle management and been promoted, but they never got this kind of foundational support and training even. And so that's where they're starting to see some of their own gaps as well as what maybe their middle management is. Am I understanding that correctly?
You know what? Yes, and I'd like to build on that.
Yeah.
One of the gaps that I believe well, I guess there are a couple of gaps that I see. One is that there are a lot of really beautiful processes out there that do not get results, right? If you were to interview companies that use a process called objectives and key results, it's OKRs, and a lot of tech companies, which is my background, use them. 80% of the members of those organizations, if you ask, how are OKRs working for you? Are they helping you deliver? Yeah. 80% of people say no, right? So it's this beautiful process, but it's not actually driving outcomes. If you look at performance reviews and you ask people, oh, performance reviews are coming up, are you excited? The chance that you will get someone who's actually excited about a performance review is very, very low. It's a complex, burdensome process. But what's crazy is there's so much opportunity in doing it well. There's opportunity for the worker, there's opportunity for the manager. And so those are like two simple examples of processes that are gorgeous, but they're not driving results. And I think that's the biggest gap in management training is a lot of it was built out. Maybe it was built out by academics or by folks in the organization who don't actually do the work. And so it becomes cumbersome and no one ever checks to make sure it works. So I would say results are the biggest thing. The second gap is that inefficiency, right? The cumbersomeness of it. There are things in companies that I think people just treat as sacred, but they're also wasteful. And that's a deadly combination, right? Sacred and wasteful.
Mm-hmm.
Status reports. Who reads them? I think that would be a really interesting dynamic or data point to find out who opens them, who reads them, who acts on them. Analysis. What numbers, how many numbers of what we present back to groups or leadership are actually numbers that anyone is taking action on or that are making a difference? It is, and the last thing is, how many times do we hear the phrase, I'll book the follow-up? All of these are indicators that we've got inefficiency inside of our companies. We've got status reports that are likely not being read. We've got a lot of data analytics, the bulk of which are irrelevant to whether we're going to get results. And then we've got meetings that aren't getting done what they're supposed to, and people are booking a repeat of the first one in order to tie things off or circle back. Those phrases are all indicators that not only are we losing time, but we're losing money and we're losing heart. So there's some serious gaps in management as a practice that I think whether you were trained how to be a manager yesterday or you were trained 40 years ago, I think those gaps are still there.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I before we get too much further in, I just want to let people know we've been talking about your book. So I want to let people know where they can find it. So if you go to Christine's website, I just put it on the screen, deliveratscale.com/books. That's where you're going to be able to grab up your very own copy, just like I did.
Yay.
And that way, there's a couple different ways that you can buy on that link. I believe there's a way to buy directly from you, which is a great way to support you directly. There's also the convenience of Amazon, because who doesn't love the convenience of Amazon? So either way, being able to get, the most important thing is being able to get this information into the hands of people who need it. So if people are interested in grabbing up a copy from you, that's where people can go, which is, again, right there on the screen. It looks like you had a thought. Go ahead.
I've seen another interesting thing that just happened in the last 3 months. I've seen a rush of multi-copy orders. So while Amazon doesn't discount multi-copy orders, I can. So reach out to me and let me know if you're like, hey, Christine, I'd like to give it to all the folks in our management team. Just talk to me and we'll figure out a way to take care of that for you.
I love that. Yeah, I remember when we were in person because you were
Yeah.
able to bring copies with you and people were able to take them home. People were taking stacks with them. So they were able to not only have a copy for themselves. I know that I have a second copy over here as well because I knew that it was going to be something I was going to make sure to gift and hand off because of how valuable it is. And I know that we got into what are those gaps that you were seeing that weren't being addressed, partly because you we were talking about before we went live, your methodology has really been trained for being uniquely actionable and refreshingly like no nonsense. You were talking about it just being a lot of what's in the marketplace was theoretical, academic, or inspirational. Is there anything else? I know you've touched on it already, but I just want to make sure. Is there anything else that like you feel like looking at the management training that this book is filling in gaps that weren't already being addressed? And it's okay if not, because I know we really touched on that heavily.
So when the book was done, I was working with my publisher and we were going through the last run before you send it off to the printer to have it be set. And what we added was something I hadn't ever seen in a book before. We added a tools index in the back. So that way there are 50 tools spread throughout, but there are moments that someone's like, yeah, I'm working too fast to go in order. I just need to get to this thing. Do you have anything about this thing? And the tools index is something that I've been hearing from readers is a great way to use a book like we use assets like YouTube, right? You have a broken, I don't know, blind in your office. You have something else that you need to look up and you just go look quickly for a quick video that helps you figure it out. And that addition in the back of the book is something I have to give credit to my editorial team for because it is something that a lot of readers are using.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love it. Well, and I know that your reputation precedes you for solving complex challenges with practical solutions, like we're just been talking about.
Yeah.
And that's attracted a wide range of leaders that you've had an opportunity to work with, everything from like tech startups all the way through Fortune 500s. And I remember you sharing previously that leadership principles are industry agnostic. So because you've had the opportunity to be working with such a diverse range of types of organizations, what is there any like universal truth about effective leadership that emerged from this experience that shaped these tools that you've shared in the Modern Management Mentor?
Oh my gosh, no, I don't care if you are running a chemical company or a manufacturing company or a tech startup or a healthcare organization. Leaders have a responsibility to simplify in order to reduce the noise for their people. And there's a fascinating concept called weekend language, where basically, like if you're at a fire pit with all of your friends, you're not going to say like, oh, I'm upskilling my workforce, right? They're all going to be like, are you kidding me? But if you said, I'm teaching the folks in my factory how to do software development, because not only are some of the devices that used to be completely mechanical that we build, not only are some of them now running with software inside of them, a lot of the aspects inside of our warehouse use software as well. So as I train them, now all of a sudden we have more people who can work on our full portfolio of products. They can help recover from issues when we have them. It makes them more valuable, and then they're paid more in the marketplace, right? So that's a practical way to say the same thing as I'm upskilling my workforce, right?
Yeah.
In the workplace, like how many times do we hear a boss who says something like, we need to be transparently leading from the front? And we're like, we do. And you get back to your desk and you're like, I have no idea what that means.
Mm-hmm.
But if the leader had said, look, Christine, I want you to share your quarterly goals with your team. You have to show them how you built a goal around your own personal development, and then show how you took all of the noise around you and you really boiled it down to like 2 business targets you have for the next 90 days. That practical language and that simplification is really hard, but it's deeply powerful when our teams have clear guidance from us about where they need to be headed. It's a like in the book, I would say there are a couple of things that lend themselves toward that example. The one-on-one process is resonating with people. A lot of folks are saying, I've been having these meetings, but I don't know, do I even need them? But when you add a little bit of structure and you start to talk about how it can tie to getting results and keeping a hybrid employee engaged and really knowing what's going on inside of your team, all of a sudden it makes more sense. There's another section about the questions to ask your boss before you take on a new responsibility. And that seems to be resonating a lot for folks as well, because it's a great way to walk into something that's ambiguous. The reason you got it is because it's either ambiguous or in trouble or both. And so it's a great way to get just an understanding of the system that you're walking into so that you can make it different. So simplification has to take down noise for our teams. And when we can do that, then they can go so much faster.
I love it. I love that the concept that the management's role is to clear that path for simplicity and clarity.
Yes.
I love just your clarity of saying when we use these abstract ideas or these concepts like the upskilling or leading from the front with transparency, like people can't conceptualize what that means, but when you spell it out with clear, specific examples, and people go, oh, I get it. I see that. And I understand how to translate that actually into in a practical way into the work that we're doing.
Okay, I want to tell you a secret too. Sometimes that big language is a leader hiding because they can use that vague language. And then if somebody asks them later, oh, did you mean this? They can say, yes, I did. Or, oh my gosh, I meant that. And it's lazy, honestly. If we can't break it down to weekend language so that everyone in our team understands it, we don't have clarity ourselves. And we cannot expect our people to go out and hit a target when we don't have the clarity of what the target is ourselves. So it's interesting how some of this simplification is actually a forcing function on the leader to make certain that the leader's tight on what really is the top priority and what needs to be done, and they've got a clear understanding of their team. So it builds strength down, but it also builds strength up too.
Yeah, I love it. I know that one of the parts that we were delighted about bringing you in and sharing with our audience, which by the way, I want to just acknowledge and celebrate that you have become one of our most recent individual partners of Conscious Capitalism Chicago chapter. So thank you so much for joining us in that kind of way.
Thanks.
But really, if people are not familiar, conscious capitalism has 4 primary pillars. And I'm curious, how do you see the intersection of conscious capitalism principles and modern management practices shaping the future of business? And what effect does that have on society as a whole?
Gosh, okay. So
I know that's a big question.
It was a big question. I'm gonna start with your end. So if you think about society as a whole, let's start there. So let's talk about the generations. You've got, and I have notes so I don't miss this.
Yeah.
Gen Z, 24 and under, millennials, 25 to 44, X, 44 to 60, boomers, 60 to 70, traditionalists, 70 and up. Many senior leaders in organizations, executives, are in the boomer and traditionalist ranks right now. So 60 and older. Many are, not all, but many. Their values are hierarchy, tradition, respect, achievement only after you pay your dues, right? Those are important words for us to remember because they don't line up with conscious capitalism. So I'd argue that conscious capitalism was ahead of the curve because the values that line up with the majority of our workers and managers inside of our organizations. So Z, millennial, and X are independence, challenge, They want balance. They expect and support the greater good. They prefer millennial managers. So what's happening is in our society, I would say the majority of our workforce is aligned to the values of conscious capitalism. And I would say the majority of executives or senior leaders might not be. And there's a huge opportunity to reset our leaders so that they can resonate with, inspire, and successfully lead to results the people who are inside of their organization. I think management is behind and it needs to modernize. I think conscious capitalism was ahead. And it's interesting. One of my favorite things about conscious capitalism is that it is reasonable to expect that financial success and doing things that have a widely applicable positive impact are not necessarily apart from each other. And if you just look at this through the cold eyes of a capitalist, if you want to get the best out of your staff, you need to understand their values, and their values really tightly aligned. So conscious capitalism is ahead. I think management is behind. But you asked another question too about the pillars. And if you think about the pillars, right, you've got just a simple example. So stakeholder orientation is thinking beyond just your shareholders, right? So you're thinking beyond just what you do to raise the value of your stock at the most simple level. When a leader can reframe from this is what we're doing and how it raises the stock price to this is what we're doing and this is how it helps your career. This is what you're doing, and this is how it helps our team contribute. And this is what you're doing, and this is why the people who buy our products or our services have a better life because of it. They become an effective storyteller through instead of a narrow lens of what impact is, they have a much broader lens. So that's how I think good modern management ties to stakeholder orientation. To build on that, higher purpose. The best leaders I know are storytellers, right? They can talk to you about the work that you're doing and how it's going to make a difference. They understand what elements of the impact of your work are going to resonate for you or that are going to resonate for customers, and they tell a story that builds it. And I think great leaders too, they build an environment of trust and cooperation. Those are hard and they take work. But when you do that, all of a sudden you're able to, then everybody's buying in and everybody's leaning in the same direction. So I think there's so much, there's relevance for society as a whole. And then as we look at the pillars inside of conscious capitalism, there are ways that being a great leader in a modern way are going to build you to that holistic place that you want to be.
Absolutely. And I think that like you touched on conscious culture in that last part, even without naming it, that of this, this environment in which people understand and are bought in and care and feel valued within the organization and their contribution. And I think that it's easy to pick up something like this and recognize how it connects to conscious leadership, right? And I believe that the founders of conscious capitalism, even in the book, they talk about how conscious leadership is the cornerstone pillar. Without that, these other pieces are pretty impossible to actualize. And so I know you've guided teams at pretty recognizable companies like Groupon and McDonald's, major transformations. What surprised you most about what actually drives sustainable or like lasting change, and especially in large organizations like that?
Early in my career, I was so proud of the best practices that I wrote. And I will be honest, in hindsight, I realized I kind of inflicted those on people inside of my company. And I just had such confidence that if you had a great best practice, that anyone could get something done if they had a good recipe, a good practice to follow. And the wisdom of my career is that that's not actually the case. If you have a choice between a best practice and the best people, you always go with best people, because then they can handle things that maybe no one's ever seen before. When I was I've got two practical examples for you, because what I've found is that I don't care how much money you spend on a change effort. If you do not do two things, find a way to reinforce it and find a way to adapt it when it doesn't work, you are going to fail. You might as well just throw your money out a window. And I've got a couple of examples for you. At McDonald's, I helped build the first multi-year tech roadmap, right? And we were so excited and so proud of ourselves. We used guidelines about how we were going to build the roadmap to our capacity. It was reasonable. It was beautiful. And then 6 months later, there was a big shift in business, and we were asked to add a big body of work into what we were doing. And everything had been bumping along just fine, right? But then when we had to work that big body of work in, it would have been really easy to just add it in and say, we'll figure it out. But we didn't do that. Instead, we really challenged ourselves. What we know about the capacity of that work means other things have to come out. So there are basically some projects that people are huge fans of that we need to stop in order to borrow those engineers to switch them over to help build out this other project. So had we not held our ground, reminded ourselves of what our guidelines were, and then gone through that really tough process of resetting the plan, we could have just slipped right back into bad behaviors where we said yes to everything and then never really got anything done on time. But that took hanging in with the process 6 months after it had started, and then being ready to actually do the tough work when it happened. It's hard. It is really hard in practice to say no to work. It is really hard in practice to prioritize one thing over another, and but it's deeply valuable when you get it done. At Groupon, we had come up. We changed how we developed software from a method that's called waterfall. I'm going to get a little technical for just a second. Waterfall is when you design the whole thing, and then you do the software development on the whole thing, and then you do testing on the whole thing, and then you release it. It's usually like years before you get something out to market. And because of that, by the time you release it, it's usually not that functional because people's needs have changed, or maybe you missed something. So we changed to a software methodology called Agile, where the goal is to release something every about 2 weeks. And we had more than 90 teams around the globe who were now doing this. And one of the things myself and my team had come up with were measurements that we were looking for to make sure that the teams were healthy. And there's this really cool data point that you can look at in software development teams, and it's called turbulence. And it's one of my favorites. What it does is it measures every team plans for 2 weeks, and then you look at what the team got done after the 2 weeks are over. And turbulence is the rate of change inside those 2 weeks. So they started with a plan on Monday the 1st. By the 15th, how much of the plan got like set aside and replaced with something else? And when you watch those numbers, they indicate to you that you've got a team problem. You've got a planning problem or an accuracy problem, but you can go fix it. So we set a target for all the teams to have less than a certain number of turbulence inside of their projects. And there were 4 teams, and they were not all from the same geographic area, so it wasn't a geography problem. They weren't in the same software organizations, so it wasn't a software problem. The easy thing would have been to just say, like, hit your turbulence numbers, right? But when we spent time and we actually worked with those teams, we figured out that ability to change and pull something in with a day's notice and deliver it quickly was critical to their success and to the organization's success. So instead of mandating one turbulence number across everyone, we gave those 4 a different turbulence number, deliberately by design. A lot of folks who come up with processes and practices do two things. They put the process in place and then they step away, and they don't do that reinforcement, which is the tough staying in there. And when something hard comes up, you really have to work it through and help the teams work it through. The second thing people don't do is they don't have the humility to say, hey, what I designed in the first place really isn't working for everyone. So it's a good idea for us to tweak. So the things that I've learned in my career is no matter how much money you spend, you better be ready to hang in there and reinforce through multiple cycles. And you better be ready to make adjustments when it's necessary for the success of certain people in your teams.
Yeah, I love it. And I think that what's beautiful about that is that it really prioritizes both the productivity and the outcome that we're driving towards, but also it prioritizes the well-being of the team. I think that that just directly shows I care about whatever we're building working for you. Is designed to support you, and anybody who is part of a team or a company that they really believe in the work, they want to feel like they're making meaningful contributions. And when we're not making sure that the systems and structures are set up for that, that's when we end up with the people feeling burnt out, feeling discouraged, feeling underappreciated, like spinning their wheels. Why are we doing all of this? But when we have our finger on that pulse and going, is this working? Is it not? How do we adjust? And the feedback loop is quick, like you're saying, with the 2 weeks, then it's so much easier to make those adjustments. And so I love that you mapped out and shared about the agile method with that. It looks like you have a thought though. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the other thing I would add on to that is the humility of a leader to say, this is not working, and I want to work with you to figure out what is. This starts to give freedom to other people inside of the company to say, wait a minute, here's like, I'm not going to be thought less of if I backtrack off of a hard stance that I took that now I realize isn't effective. It's a value of this organization to make adjustments. So I need to keep like, it's okay for me to ask a question, make a suggestion. It's contagious. This humility thing is contagious, especially when everyone is trying to gain progress and get results.
Yeah. And I think it's not just about the leaders being willing to have that humility on the back end when they realize something isn't working. It's proactively leading with, we are testing this as a team and saying part of our goal right now is to be looking for what's working so we can lock that in, and what's not working so we can tweak it. So the whole team is bought into what you're saying, being able to be paying attention, not just to executing on the process, but being zoomed out and a little meta about paying attention to how the process is moving through. Does that feel true in your experience?
Yeah.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I know I have a couple more questions for you, but before we jump into that, I just want to, again, anybody who might be joining us now, remind you that if you're interested in picking up your own copy of Christine's book, you can at deliberatescale.com/books, and you'll be able to grab up a copy there. As a reminder too, if you would like to get several copies to be able to distribute within your organization, you can contact Christine directly in order to do that. What's the best way for people to contact you directly?
Christine at deliberatescale.com. Also through LinkedIn. Send me a message through LinkedIn. Very easy.
I love it. I love it. And for those who may not know, the reason that we're having this conversation today, this continuing the conversation, is because Christine was one of our guest speakers at our November Leadership Breakfast, which is one of the series that we have going. That's an in-person event for our Conscious Capitalism Chicago chapter. But we have a lot of events coming up. And so we want to just invite people, if you're interested in these types of conversations, get involved. Come check us out. You don't have to be a member, or we've actually started shifting that language to partner, because we believe that this is a movement people are partnering with. But you don't have to be a partner yet. You can come be a guest, and you can go to consciouscapitalismchicago.org/events and programs, and you'll be able to see all of the upcoming events. The next one is going to be on January 16th. So that's next Thursday in the evening. So we'll have an evening event instead of breakfast, but that is going to be with Claudia Freed. She's going to be our spotlight speaker, and we're very excited to be having her, but there's a lot of ways to get involved. So if you're not able rather to get involved with us on that date, there are plenty of other opportunities that are already live on our website. And what I'm working on, and hopefully Christine's schedule will align, is we're hopefully going to have a deepening the conversation with Christine that's going to be a virtual event, but it's not going to be live. It's going to be an invitation, not an invitation, only a registration event is what I meant, so that you can come be in the room, have a more intimate conversation, be able to ask questions. And so just keep an eye out as we hopefully get that planned and coordinate our schedules to have yet another opportunity to continue this conversation with Christine in a meaningful way. You can be in the room as opposed to just letting me be in the driver's seat the whole time. But I do want to make sure that we ask a couple more questions as we round out. I also realize that we've been talking about your book, but what else do you have going on in your world? What should we know about besides the book?
Oh, gosh. So I do two things. The majority of my time is spent doing advisory work with leaders and teams, and part of my time is spent speaking. And so talks that have coming up just in the next month or so are, I'm giving a talk with Next Up about hybrid leadership best practices, a talk with Women in Tech about modern management, and then with the Executives Club in Chicago, I'm running a workshop on building a personal brand as a leader, and it's elements of storytelling and data that you use and how you're getting results from your team and developing talent that's so amazing that people steal them away from you. So those are a couple of talks that are coming up that I'm excited about. But I'm really excited about the work that I do as well with leaders and companies. And they're across all sorts of different industries. And so that makes it even more fun and interesting.
And if people are interested in working with you in that more hands-on, integrated way of being able to bring you in, not just for a talk, but being able to work with you directly like that, how should people, what's the process of working with you like that?
The process is a conversation. So send me a note to Christine at Deliver at Scale and just tell me what the problem is. And then the two of us will chat for a little while, and then we'll figure out what is the right fit. Is the right fit an event with, so I'll give you some examples. So I just ran a workshop for a billion-dollar software company where they had 70 leaders come in for a leadership workshop to talk about how they were going to restructure a very large function inside of the organization. Half of the leaders are going to be expected to grow their group substantially, and the other half need to actually let folks go and restructure their work in order to support the overall strategy. So large change. We did a 3-hour workshop where we talked about how to lead during change, not just change, but change in their company. How should they tell stories differently? How can they get results when there's a lot of tension and stress going on? And how do they build their people, whether their people are staying in part of growth or potentially likely to leave? And then the reinforcement part is we're doing office hours here in the next few weeks where they're going to be able to come in at 2 different time zones that serve their organization and ask any questions they're having if they're having any trouble applying some of the tactics that we talked about. I have, that's probably like a simple way, but what that started with was a woman who heard me speak, and then we talked about what's going on in her company, and then we designed the workshop and the tools and tactics to hit specific needs that she had. And I work that way, whether I'm working with a large group or I'm working with a leader. We start with the problem, we figure out where we want to get to, and then we figure out what that looks like in terms of an engagement.
That just speaks directly to my heart. I love just the way that you work with people to customize solutions that are, like we've been saying from the beginning of this conversation, really practical.
Right. We don't need to waste time. There shouldn't be a template. There shouldn't be a standard binder. There should not be. It should be me on a tight wire without a net, listening to you, and then figuring out what I can do and having you agree that what I'm going to do is going to make a difference for you, because results matter, right? That's the reason why we're talking, is to get a different outcome.
I agree. I love it. And then one of the things I've been really excited to ask you is, what is one thing about your work that you wish people would ask, but they don't, and you'd love to share right now?
I wish people would ask what all my clients have in common, because you look at my clients, you're like, Christine, man, there's no commonality, right? Currently, I'm working with a large chemical company, with a financial company, with an educational software company, a large advertising firm, some startups in Chicago. So the range is just so wide. But what they have in common is each of them deeply appreciates having their own personal advocate, their own chief of staff. So I'm a safe person that they can here are things that I've done just in the last 30 days. Someone brought me a presentation of how she is explaining the function of her very large team to executives in her organization, because they just went through a big merger and acquisition, and she knows that there's going to be restructuring coming. So she wants to have a very clear summary of what her people do and how they contribute to the organization and what she's done since she's owned those teams. So she and I worked together, and I was able to read through and say, I think these points are really critical, and I think they need to come up to your first page. I'm surprised that you don't have something in here about this area that you and I have been talking about for the last 2 months. So she's going to be ready for that meeting and for that sharing. I had another leader who brought her targets and results to me and said, I am hitting all my targets, but the board is worried about my effectiveness. Why are they worried about my results when this is what I'm doing? And we were able to go through all of her goals and reframe them in the context of how they lined up to the CEO's goals, instead of the way she had oriented them. And the board has now given her more funding, let her expand her remit. So these are just a couple of examples of where someone's like, okay, I can be honest with you. I can show you everything I've got going on, and I can say, what should I change? What should I adapt? And then I'm there hanging with you if it works, if it doesn't work, and we make adjustments. So the power of that kind of a personal chief of staff, a pragmatist, a fresh set of eyes, is deeply powerful. Leadership is lonely. The higher you go, like the less folks you have to go to that really have your outcomes as the top of their mind. So to be industry agnostic, to be a deeply experienced pragmatist, especially for someone who's under pressure, is my favorite part of my work. And it's what I'm hearing back from my clients is their favorite part about me.
Well, I know I could probably talk to you all day, but I also recognize that you have a full schedule today, and I want to honor and respect your time. I'll wrap us up with one last question then, if that's all right. What is the most counterintuitive lesson about scaling leadership that you've discovered?
That you lose freedom. You think like, oh, I'm the CEO, I will have complete freedom. No, you have to be in board meetings, and board meetings are on the third Thursday. No, you can't say everything that's in your mind or in your heart because you're the leader, because everybody listens to you. And if you misstep a bit on phrasing, people might change direction. You might be like, oh no, I didn't want that to happen. You're going to know things that you can't share with other people. So even if you're not the CEO, every step you take as you scale, you lose calendar freedom, you lose your freedom to speak openly, and this weight that you carry of losing that freedom is what helps your team grow. And I think a lot of people think as you go up, you become more free. And I will tell you that you lose it, and that loss is critical to your effectiveness. Weird, huh?
Yeah, that was not the answer I was expecting. But also, that's why it was what is counterintuitive. So, wow, I think that that's such clear insight for people to manage their expectations about what that looks like, both from the experiential side of the one who is moving up into those different positions, but also having some empathy for those who are following those leaders, to recognize that and see the humanity of that. I think that, to your point, you were mentioning a little bit ago about it's lonely the higher up in leadership you get, and I think that that's because sometimes some of our humanity starts to also disappear in the public eye, and there isn't as much empathy for those leaders, I think. And I that would lead us into a whole deeper conversation, but I feel like there's room to recognize that for ourselves, but then also for those who are following, recognizing some of those limitations.
I wonder if it's less that empathy erodes for leaders and it's more that expectations rise, right? Because you're more seasoned, more senior than me. I expect you to honestly have your shit together, right? To not say something that makes the rest of us anxious, to not do something that puts our business at risk. So I have pretty high expectations of you because you're getting paid well. You are more senior than me. So I expect you to be strong enough to carry us sometimes. Yeah. So I don't know if yes, it probably is a lack of empathy, but it's also a bit of a growing expectation as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that pushback on my perspective. I think that that's true. I think that as we are taking on more responsibility, the expectations grow, as they should, and people are holding us to a higher expectation because of the responsibilities that we have.
And maybe what this ties back to too is a little bit of what we were talking about just a few minutes ago. The value that I'm hearing from clients is you are a safe place for me to come and talk about my doubts, to bring my work product and say, like, am I on the right track? Because I need to be solid before I get in front of my team, my board, my organization, and you're a safe place to come. So there is something about contracting an empathetic ear, right? Someone to listen to you and say, like, oh my God, you're right. This is chaotic. You did not cause this. This is what I see happening. These are factors. Did you realize that? Because sometimes people will call me and they'll say, and Christine, this horrible thing happened. I think I just messed it up. And I'll listen through and I'll ask a couple questions and I'll be able to point out things that they missed. So that empathy too comes a lot of times from peers, right? And you just lose peers as you go up. So I think there's something to what you said about a loss of empathy as we rise as well.
Yeah, it's always complex. It's a little bit of both and. Yeah.
Yep.
Well, I'll wrap us up there. For those who are excited about these kinds of conversations, I invite you to join us for other events and programs that we have coming up with Conscious Capitalism here in Chicago. And then also, as a reminder, you can get your own copy of the Modern Management Mentor, and you're going to be able to do that right here at deliveratscale.com /books. And I know you mentioned at the very beginning that it got its third award, which is, I think, more I think that when I saw you in person, it only had 2 awards, and now it has 3. Tell us more about that as we wrap up. Which goes out there.
It's really fun. So the first award was for a top book of 2023 from Kirkus Reviews. Kirkus' nickname is Cranky Kirkus because they do not consistently give kind reviews. So I am thrilled that they liked the book. It's a big deal. The second award came from a Midwest Publishing Excellence Group, and they really focus on independent publishers who deliver exceptional content. So they're checking everything, not just the content of the book, but the layout, its use, reactions from a large panel that looks at it. And the most recent award was for big ideas in business. From Goody, and they are kind of conscious capitalism aligned because they're looking for ideas that don't just drive results, but help make an effective workplace for human beings. So thank you for asking.
Yeah, congratulations again. I'm so glad that we're closing on that note. Thank you so much for being generous with your time. It was so lovely to chat with you again. And I'm going to look forward to the next time that we get to connect. Thank you so
Me
much.
too, Cassandra. Thank you so much. I love the work that you do. I love the organization that you're part of. For anybody who's listening, it's great for leaders to enter into this space where you talk with other leaders about big ideas. It lifts you out of the granularity of what you're doing, and each of us needs that white space, that peer group to discuss the larger implications of the work that we do. So I found it to be a terrific organization thus far. 2 thumbs up.
Thank you so much. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll look forward to hopefully more of you joining us as we continue the conversation with Christine and all of our other amazing leaders that Christine was just mentioning. So everyone have a great rest of your day.